Thank you so much for staying with us. I have my panelists with me right away. First in our Abuja studio, Dr. Sanusi Ohiare, Executive Director of Electrification Fund. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And through Skype in Port Harcourt is Kelvin Fineface, an energy expert. Kelvin, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Mechi.
So let's start with you right away. A huge task for the Minister of Power, the electricity sector, so vital to the development of our economy. First, let's take a look at that sector. What kind of a problem is the minister meeting in this power sector?
Well, first, let me start by saying that you can see I'm right now in my car, and that is because there's no power in River State, in the part of River State that I'm living in. It's been off since last night. I had to get to use my car to be able to power the phone because the generator just packed up. So these are the problems we face daily as Nigerians. And so the minister coming on board, I'm sure is someone who has the depth to understand the Nigerians' problem. So he has a big task at hand. And that is that he needs to begin to do what we call decentralized, power generation system. So you have to do the distributed power generating system and distribution, ensuring that power is generated where it is needed and distributed in that environment, which is the DSEA, in order to bridge the kilowatt divide that we currently have as a country. It is a shame that as a country in the 21st century, a country of 200 million people plus counting, we don't generate up to 50,000 megawatts of power. That is very possible if the minister will say, look, let's look at the national grid system as a failure and focus on distributed energy generation, ensuring that every state generates what they need and distributes what they need within that environment. Then whatever excess they have, they throw that to the national grid. So the national grid, which is a national security concern, will become something that we can look at the long-term effect. But in the short term, we need to decentralize our power generation, or else we'll not make any meaningful progress. And that's what we are suffering currently.
Decentralization in such a way that the off-grid producers will be brought into play. That's exactly what you mean.
Beautiful. The off-grid producers will come and say, we can look at different sources of energy generation. We have the solar, we have hydro, we have the turbines, gas turbines. We also have the normal power that we use. So what we can actually begin to do as a country, as a matter of national emergency, to say, look, let's all look at the business district area, generate what they need within an environment. Residential generate what they need within an environment. Why don't we begin to ask the government to come up with a policy to ensure that only LEDs are installed in homes, and also ensure that instead of going on the 110 volts capacity that we use currently, 220 volt capacity we use currently, we can deploy the 110 volt capacity, which means that we can deface the 220 that was introduced by the British and employ the American power system. With the 110, you are sure guaranteed to have more power shared to more people. Yes, we have equipment currently on ground that is 220 volts, but the government can use it as a matter of urgency and policy, national policy, to ensure that whatever goods that are coming in, electronic goods that are coming in, are 110. So it means that your solar panels can easily power those equipment. If your solar panels can equip your power your electronics at home, your fridge, your TV, everything, it means that you don't need to depend on national grid. All we need to do is to get the panels, ensure that we have the right panels. The SON give us the standard that is required so that people who are importing these panels will import the right panels on ground. Once they're able to bring the right panels on ground, the right power will be generated. So offices and homes, like your studio for instance, your cameras and all that use 12 volts and 19 volts equipment, which is a step-down power solution. It means that you need to use a power pack that can get the power from 220. So, but if you do the 110 power solution, you don't need the power pack. All you do is use a solar, and you are powering your equipment in the studio. That's what the minister should be focused on.
Being smart here, Dr. Ohiare, according to Kelvin Fineface, smart in terms of by standardization, ensuring that the equipment that demand for what's in electricity, what's in Nigeria, those ones are the ones that will not put pressure on it, and having the right energy mix.
Very well. I agree with Kelvin about having the right energy mix. Every serious country would strive to, optimize its energy mix based on, available resources. And in the past, let me just take us a bit back. Before this present administration came in 2015, the focus had been largely on grid. 90% of our resources, 90% of our expertise, everybody was talking about grid expansion and all of that. And I like the fact that Kevin mentioned, that we should now look towards, decentralized solutions and off-grid. And that's where we come in. I work with the Rural Electrification Agency, and in 2015, when the president came, because he wanted to move towards this diversification of energy and having a robust energy mix, he gave a matching order for the Rural Electrification Agency to look towards how we can, build the market for off-grid. And this necessitated having some sort of reforms and regulations. For instance, the mini-grid regulations. And this mini-grid regulation basically allows for, smaller players, smaller developers below 1 megawatt, to come
as many as possible.
As many as possible to come
contributing to the entire mix.
Exactly. And before then, the investors would not want to look at that area because there was no certainty on how things should move. Remember, we are now in a regulated environment, and we have the regulator, NERC, who basically has all the ultimate powers as given to it by the electric power.
That means the functions and responsibilities of the Electricity Regulatory Commission will be hugely expanded because it has also to regulate the off-grid producers.
Yes, that is a huge responsibility, to be honest. And we have, in my opinion, very capable commissioners, that can steer us through this. But we just need to, allow them to do their jobs. I think there's a tendency to, because power is very sensitive, and any policy that has to do with power supply, pricing, and all of that is highly volatile. So governments try to be very careful, but we should remember that we chose this. We said we wanted to move away from the vertically integrated system of NEPA of those days, where government was in charge of power generation, transmission, distribution, rural electrification, and everything. And there were a lot of complaints and challenges. And because of that, we said we wanted to move to a more market-driven system where we would have generation and distribution in private hands and transmission still with government, but it should be regulated by the regulator. So that means the minister or the Ministry of Power had its power stripped, from over 40,000 staff that they used to have to less than 1,000. So
after the reforms and after the Sector Reform Act.
Exactly. So now we have private people and private players, and these people have signed contracts, and everything is governed by this contract. So it's not as easy as people think that a minister can just come, a minister of power, and just use a magic wand and make everything or make everybody fall in line. The minister has some powers, and I appreciate my minister, the new Minister of Power, Engineer Saleh Maman, because when he called the very first top management meeting, I liked his approach. He understands that it's a very complex sector, so he listened to everybody, and of course it's an information overload because we have a lot of information and data to pass out, but he has said that he wants to take his time, to study the sector, understand the immediate challenges, the low-hanging fruits, what we need to do, and then see how we can proceed. Obviously, he'll come up with his roadmap. But before now, a lot had been done under the last minister, Babatunde Raji-Fashola.
So there's need for continuity?
There's need for continuity.
No new policies? No new programs?
The policies are, as handed down by the presidency, which is obviously we want more power, and then we want it to get to the people. both in the cities and in the rural communities. And that's what I think will be continued. But we'll wait for the minister to come up with his roadmap. However, the issue of off-grid, that's another area that this government has done a lot.
And where definitely they will continue to.
And that's where, yeah, we'll continue.
A lot of people have said the solution may be off-grid. But let's bring in Kevin Fiveface again. A minister coming in with less powers that he would have envisaged based on the reforms. We have the issue of discos to contend with, GENCOs, the TCN still under government control. But the problem of the capacity of the discos is one that this minister will run into. What should government do? There are talks of indeed buying back these discos or asking the discos to recapitalize, to give them that technical and financial weight to really handle the enormous responsibilities.
Okay, now, Amici, I got your question right, but let me say this also, which will help to solve all of this problem. I agree that there are some legal implications because of the month up of PHCN as it were before, so it's breaking down. What the government can do is to be able to see the power sector as a national security concern by declaring an emergency in that environment. See, the president can declare a state of emergency on the power sector, power and education. But let me talk about the power sector. It is by so doing that the president can at least reduce the bottleneck. Look at what the president did. Before these ministers came in, the president has signed contract with Siemens, which is government-to-government relationship, to generate more power, cutting off the bureaucracy that would have come with that, contractor relationship, and that would have affected. That's more like a subtle emergency arrangement the president did. So the same templates can be deployed by declaring a national emergency on power, so that the power sector can be devoid of the bureaucracy that it comes with, thereby reducing the high commercial profit interest, so that we can truly decentralize, distribute, so that more homes can get. The off-grid system will have a little challenge if the national policy is not put in place to ensure that standards are maintained. It is very important to state that standards are maintained. Currently, we have about 60% of influx of equipment, solar panels, batteries, and the other, accessories that comes with off-grid, technology that are substandard equipment.
That is where the Nigerian Electricity Management Services will come in, because they have the responsibility to ensure standardization of this equipment. And I know they've been doing a lot in this regard.
Beautiful. So we have that coming in. So what will also happen, that we begin to have e-waste and environmental waste that will affect us, because there are no recycling plans for some of these things. So the government, as a national security policy, will see the power sector in such a way that the standards that are required to be there, that are easily recyclable products that will come into place. More homes are given loans to buy power, which they can sell back to national grid at the end of the day. What we have in the US and other countries, in the Scandinavian country, for instance, people generate power and sell their power to the government, because government needs that. You cannot run away from national grid, because that's our national security. But we cannot, at the same time, be thinking of national security while the people are more impoverished. See, I'm in my car currently, using power to power the phone, so that I ensure that we don't go blank out while we're talking. That can be stopped if only there is a solution, easily accessible solution to solve this. And guess what that will happen? It will result to high increase in productivity, because the young men and women in the country who have what to offer will be able to utilize the power that's available to provide services, goods and services within an environment. It means there will be profitability. It means that there will be human capital development. It means that there will be more revenue to the state and the federal. So the government should look at it from that perspective, to see that power is taken as a national security concern, and it requires a national emergency, as much as we're doing with security in the country.
Okay.
That is the only way the minister can bring better results.
Okay.
Sorry to, before you go,
okay.
I mean, the minister said he's going to study to see what is on ground. You see, I have a problem with this country. We oftentimes get people who are not fully prepared for offices and giving them those responsibilities. I think that with where we are with the 21st century, the president will be able to take his time to get someone who will understand the intricacies and the politics of that environment, who are already been abreast. So you do a pre-job interview. It is by so doing you know who is fit for what portfolio. But when you get people and you expect them to learn on the job, it takes away time. That's why we lose so much time in development.
Is it learning or understanding the bureaucratic setup?
Of course, I do, but we need to be able to interview the right people for the right job. A square peg in a square hole, we give you the right job, reduce time, we help you to implement projects and processes and programs within the shortest possible time. So you have a baseline which you can use to pursue your timeline. It is the best thing we can do. We have a president who is not prepared for the office. We have ministers who are not prepared for the office. We have governors who are not prepared for the office. At the end of the day, what do we have? Failed system.
Okay, we'll come back to you, but let Dr. Ohiare, a whole lot of efforts must be put in. He mentioned issues of standards of equipment, issues of a policy to guide the off-grid, and possible amendment of the laws to create that new role they are expected to play in the entire electricity sector.
Right, I'll get back to standards. Let me just quickly correct an impression alluded to by my friend Kelvin in Port Harcourt. The minister is a thoroughbred engineer, electrical engineer, and he has been, a top civil servant, retired, and then went into politics, and then he has been called, by the president in his wisdom. To serve, the country, and he's supported.
He's not new in the electricity.
No, he's not new in the.
But what about the statement that he's understanding and learning?
To be honest, even if you employ somebody that's been within the sector, he still needs to understand. Try and take his time to come up with his own roadmap. And it's not something. The sector is so complex that you have different moving parts. Yes, you can be a thoroughbred engineer. You understand the issues, but if you're not a good administrator, in order to bring people together and try and see how we can forge ahead, be on the same page, and all of those things, then you would never really succeed. So it's not about just being a technocrat or knowing the issues. It's also about your ability to be able to bring all the stakeholders.
So will all these affect a minister hitting the ground running?
No, not really, because like I said, the previous minister had done a lot in trying to bring everybody together to try and move towards a common goal. We have several projects that are at various stages of completion, and I think the minister would want to quickly complete some of these projects. Some of them are the Mambila 3050 hydro project. We have the Kashimbila one. We have the Afam fast power. We have the Kaduna power plants. We have another one in Katsina.
The Mambila Thermal Power Project is a huge project.
It's a huge one.
That will bring in a lot. So there's this pressure on the minister to see it through.
Yes.
A lot of efforts in conceptualization, loan agreement from China. The actual construction and delivery should.
Exactly, and interestingly, we had funding challenges before now, and this government has been able to secure that. We have an arrangement where the Chinese government will bring in some funds, and then the rest will be paid by the Nigerian government through the sovereign national investment authority, and that's been guaranteed. So the issue is just about
guaranteed funding.
Yes, there's a guaranteed
funding. About the sovereign wealth fund and the Chinese loan.
Yes,
so delivery must be within the stipulated time.
And that's one of the key areas that the minister obviously would want to look at, and then all of the other ones that I've mentioned. But then complementary in all of this, let me just quickly talk about the standards. As the agency, the Rural Electrification Agency is the agency with the mandate to drive off-grid, and for us, any project we do or any program that we do, we ensure. I think we are the only agency that requires NEMSA certificate as one of the criteria for you to come and bid for any of our jobs.
So it should be uniform.
Yes.
For the entire power sector.
And that's why
really make NEMSA very relevant.
Exactly. And that's why anytime before you even qualify to bid for a job, NEMSA has to issue a certificate to make sure that you are complying with all of the standards, you know, and safety nets. And
on the issue of laws, are there policy to come out to guide this of grid?
Yes, like I mentioned, we have the Rural Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan, which was signed by this president in 2016. We also have the mini grid regulation, which allows for people, I mean, investors that want to invest in anything below 1 megawatt to be able to go in and invest their money and then have some sort of certainty in terms of regulation that, you know, the distribution company, for instance, would not, you know, come and just, you know, take over, you know, their projects in the nearest future, and they have a secured kind of arrangement where they can see their return on investment over, you know, the coming years. And that's something that has really opened up the space. Right now, we have a lot of mini grids coming on stream, and these mini grids are just basically, you know, generating power from solar, batteries, you know, hybrid system, in very remote areas. Like there was one we commissioned recently in Ohiare. That place was really, really far from the grid, about 25 kilometers, you know, away off-road, and these people had never seen electricity before.
Okay, we'll take a break now. When we come back, more issues, more priorities for the new power minister. What approach, what strategy for the power sector? Very vital sector that bears on the entire economy. Please do stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. Agenda setting for the new Federal Executive Council. So much expectations on the ministers. Many of them assumed work last Wednesday, immediately after swearing in. Perhaps an indication that they are taking a heed to the president's charge to hit the ground running. So much problems, so much challenges to face. Key sectors are standing. Electricity, agriculture, economy, name it. For our agenda setting to help the ministers on policy options and strategies, we are commencing today with the power sector. And two gentlemen that are operators and have deep knowledge of issues in the power sector, Dr. Sanusi Ohiare and Kelvin Fineface, have been my guests. But let's recommence with Dr. Ohiare here. You spoke about the issue of continuity. Very critical. Most of the projects in the power sector did not start today. The Mambila Power Project, I started hearing right from the Obasanjo administration. So it's key that we stay on completion of existing projects. But beyond projects, the issue of policy guidelines, what new initiative that could be brought in, we are blessed with. Great sunshine. We have not done so much. It's lately that we are seeing solar panel, alternative energy coming in. Is an area that we must exploit if we want to really tackle our energy challenge. Yes,
Amici, I don't know whether to say unfortunately or fortunately, the minister has, you know, a huge, you know, task at hand. It depends on how he wants to play it. Really, it could turn out to be really a blessing for the country. But one thing is for sure, you know, he has retinue of, you know, top management people within the ministry, this sector, you know, that can really, he can use to achieve whatever he wants to achieve, you know, positively.
Just for the minister to provide the leadership.
Yes, that's all is required. And yeah, talking about the projects, you know, that we mentioned earlier, if you notice, the style of this president and this administration had been that of continuity, even from the previous government that we met on ground in 2015. So continue there was a marching order to all the ministries and agencies to just continue all the ongoing projects and complete them for us before we start new ones. And like for instance, the one in Mambila is a huge one that you want to see how you can reach a certain level before you even start off with other ones. But no doubt he has his own ideas and, you know, vision that he would want to bring to bear, and we are with that while he draws his roadmap. But the issue of off-grid is also very critical. It had been neglected, you know, for a long time, and this minister would want to also, you know, pay very specific
attention.
Give it
as much, if not greater attention than
because incidentally, all this greed that everybody keeps mentioning, you know, that seems to be, you know, a problem. Only 50% of the country, our population, is connected to the grid. So we still have a 50%, close to between 80 and 90 million people that, you know, off grid, and then require the same, the same, you know,
Okay.
sort of attention. So that is why it is important, you know, to continue to support, you know, the work we are doing in the off-grid space to see how we can scale up and reach as many off-grid people, you know, as possible.
Okay, quite interesting because 50% of grid
Yes.
not catered for.
Yes.
There's every need. If we can't get them into the grid, then we need to make provisions. Strong provisions, and most of them not in the cities, rural areas.
rural areas.
So strong provisions to be made. Huge tax for the minister here.
Yes, that's why it's important, you know, to have data and also to have a plan. Because like we started off with, it is important to have a robust energy mix. And everybody cannot be brought under the grid, you know, due to obvious reasons, feasibility, costs, implication, and the rest. So that's why off-grid solutions come to play. There are instances where you cannot connect, you know, a small village 25, 50 kilometers away from the grid, you know, to the national grid. But it's cheaper for you to use a mini grid, you know, for instance, using solar, you know, and battery backup. So this is what the government is now doing. We have now identified all of these areas. We have potentially between 8,000 to 9,000 mini grid sites in the country that we are looking to, you know, and provide some sort of electricity using mini grids within the nearest future.
Okay, Kevin Fineface is back online. Grid, non-grid, within the grid system, some problems. We were told that the generating companies can churn out up to 8,000 megawatts, but the distribution companies can rarely distribute. They have the capacity to rarely distribute half of it. So we have a situation, Kelvin, where half of what we are generating is lost, not getting to the end user. Is Kevin still with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you.
So we have a situation we're told about it. Did you get my question?
Yes, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. I said you can appreciate the fact that we have a leadership deficit problem as a country. And that is why you find out that we are generating about 8,000 megawatts of power and can only distribute 3,000 plus megawatts of power. Why so? Why do we often put the cart before the horse instead of the other way around? Let me also correct an impression. My friend in the studio, I wasn't necessarily looking down on the minister in the context of his capacity. Based on what he said, I made that statement that I made that he was trying to study what was happening. So I just want to correct that. It wasn't a way to embarrass the minister anyway. But having said so, the question I need to begin to ask us is this: why are we bent on going on with the national grid when we can deploy solar hydro, solar powers, mini hydros and mini grids? We have dams scattered all over the country, especially in the northern region. There are more dams that you find in the north than in the south. Why can't we deploy mini hydros to these dams so that to power those regions in the states? I like what my friend said in the studio. What's
a little problem with the connection there.
Connected to the. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
we have
go
about
ahead.
50% connected to the national grid. Okay, we have about 50% connected to the national grid. I think that figure is actually far less. If you look at 200 million Nigerians, we are less 50% connected to the national grid. Less 50%, about 35 to 40% connected to the national grid. The rural electrification drive is a good thing, but the challenge is that because some of these projects are constituency projects, you find contractors colluding with politicians, providing substandard equipment in connivance with those in government, the policy drivers. Because, see, we have a country where there's no job security. So when it comes to supervision, the last ECN, Energy Commission of Nigeria, they deploy a lot of these solutions in the rural areas, and today none of those things are working. Why? Because there was substandard equipment that were deployed to these places, street lights solutions, and otherwise they were given to these people. The point is that we can see it as a national security concern by ensuring that we begin to downgrade our voltage usage from 220 to 110, so that we can easily have solutions that are, easily powered. If you have your solar panels, I have solar panels in my office in Abuja there that powers my office with the batteries, but because you don't also have a proper standard channel, you just go buy whatever you can find in the market to buy, considering cost of the equipment and also availability of cash. So we can begin to change this narrative. The national grid system is a national security requirement, agreed, but we can change that narrative by ensuring that we go off grid solution with a 110 power, 110 voltage power requirement. So the country as national can deface to 20, or we combine both.
Okay.
In usage.
Okay.
The president also the president needs to declare national emergency on power before the minister can effectively work. The minister cannot function with the laws that are currently available on ground. The minister can't.
Extra power for the ministers to overstep bureaucratic bottlenecks and legal hurdles.
Processes. Yes, and we can look at the legal implications and subtly manage that. Until we go to until we do a national emergency, we cannot successfully get our power sector right. We'll continue to spend huge amount of money, giving those monies to politicians and their cronies and all of those people in government. And that's why the Bamila Power Project is that expensive, because of same thing, because of the kickbacks. That's why that project will be that expensive, because of the kickbacks that are involved in this things. The Chinese will come with their solution and give the money. Those in government will always want to collect their own share of the cake.
That's an allegation. That's an allegation.
I mentioned, look at what the president did with the CMS project, the CMS contract. He signed the government-to-government contract with CMS. Nobody collected kickbacks from that, because it was government-to-government relationship. It is the same way we can deploy similar solutions. Take away the contractors, let the contractors come in under subcontracting
and deal with the vendors directly.
Okay. Yeah, deal with the vendors directly.
Okay.
And so by so doing, you can get other people empowered through logistic provisions, through other consulting provisions, and not necessarily taking the main contract. That's so much money going to the hands of politicians and other and their cronies.
Okay.
We can stop all of that. Power solutions.
Let's see what our viewers are saying on our Twitter handle. Andwaka Emmanuel, he says he totally agrees with Mr. Fineface on power decentralization. Dr. Ohiare is also on it. Also, the minister needs to look into alternative affordable power sources like wind, which states like Sokoto, Borno, and other northern states can take advantage and be self-reliant in power supply. Charles Eweka, the immediate focus should be on powering all domestic appliances with solar systems. This will immediately free the national grid for large commercial and industrial concerns to use the available 3,000 megawatts. This will create thousands of jobs. Will it not tilt it towards the big men elite in the society, the manufacturers, but it also has some economic implication. But the modalities must be worked out and sources for the solar panel guaranteed. Let's get Simon Joash. The new minister needs to bring on board the TCN, DISCOs, and GENCOs together to find out some of the militating factors affecting the effective and efficient generation, willing in distribution of power supply to find lasting solution on how it can improve. And Baba, that says, his honorable minister, kudos to the guest, Dr. Ohiare, for being a model for youth inclusion and governance. Rural communities are now being connected to alternatives, sources of power, which is quite apt at this point in time, considering the dire situation of our power sector. Emergency powers for the minister, it will require National Assembly input. There are other sectors like education. I had a guest on this program last week that says the president must also declare emergency on the education sector. Some other was also on health. So many areas needing urgent attention.
I mean, I understand and appreciate the fact that everybody keeps talking about declaring emergency, but what does this emergency really mean? It means you should just fix the problem and see how, you can put processes and policies in place, to move it forward. So whether you call it emergency or whether you're doing the job without calling it anything, I mean, we're all working towards the same, goal. But for the issue of giving emergency powers to the minister, I mean, Nigerians, we need to, whenever we accept that we want to, take a certain course, we need to stick to it. If we were okay with what was happening in the past, where the minister had all the powers, we would have remained there. And I don't have a problem with that system or this one. But whichever one we choose, as experiences have shown in other countries, that either one can work, depending on the people managing it. Whichever one we choose, we should try and stick by the rules and regulations. You know what I mean? It's not like, okay, we move to this one, we are just trying to test, the waters with that one, and then we start complaining that we should go back to the other one. We have to take difficult decisions if we want to move forward. Power is very sensitive, like I mentioned earlier on, and everybody uses power. I'm a consumer as well. The minister is a consumer. The president is a consumer as well. So it affects everybody. But whatever decision we decide,
varying degrees.
Exactly. So we should decide, to move with that. Try it out at least to a great extent to see if it's even going to work for us before we start, trying to draw the brakes and put it on reverse. So that's all I have to say about it. Just to respond to a few things that Kevin mentioned. The Mambila project is also a government-to-government sort of arrangement with the Nigerian and Chinese government, and I think we shouldn't really react to speculations. We have challenges. A lot of people are not happy about what's going on, but we should try to stay on solutions rather. And this government has been doing a lot of the things that your viewers, are commenting on Twitter, which is open up the space for off-grid, bring in smaller players, see how we can use solar, wind, hydro. And Mr. Faife mentioned something about, having hydro. The ministry is working on, small hydros, for instance, under Director Farouk Yabo, where we are going to concession all the small hydros, to private developers for them to develop and, supply to immediate communities. Yeah, and this has been going on.
That's the hydros in the different dams?
Yes, the small hydros, yeah. So, and that's ongoing. And I think all the regulations that we need and the policies that we need, to be honest, in my own small experience, within the sector, for us to move forward, are largely there. Some are largely untested. So let's try them out, see how far we can go, and then if we have any issues, then we can, revert to reviewing them. What we need now is to try to encourage more investments, bring in the investors, create the enabling environment for them to come and invest. TCN is doing a good job under the MD, Mr. Guru, and we have now moved from 5,000 megawatts of wheeling capacity to about 7,500 megawatts. The distribution companies, they have challenges. To be honest, you sign an agreement with government. I'm not for the distribution company. I feel they are part of the problem, but you need to understand where they are coming from as well. You sign an agreement with government, Amici, and I am the DISCO, and you are not holding on to your own end of the bargain. You don't expect me to hold on to the end of the bargain. Government understands this, and they are now trying to see how they can, hold on to their own
way out.
Exactly, hold on to their own end of the bargain. Even invest, because we have 40% stake in the DISCOs. There's a 72 billion fund approved for expansion of the distribution network, because we have a stake there, and it is the rural people that will eventually benefit from it. The Rural Electrification Agency is also doing a lot of expansion, substation building and grid extension, just so that people can get more power, because the distribution capacity is still
is a problem.
It's still a problem.
I put the question to Five Face because I recall in 1999 when Obasanjo came as president, I recall distribution and even generation capacity was around between 2,000 and 3,000 megawatts, and today distribution capacity is about 3,000. So a huge challenge for the new minister, in your conclusion, to really look for the magic wand, if it exists, to pull Nigeria out of this electricity problem.
Well, there's something that really thrives in this country, in Nigeria, which is that people profit so much from chaos. I don't want to be politically correct, okay? And I don't just make spurious allegations or make statements just like that, just to correct this thing. If you notice, since 1999, when Obasanjo came into power, one of the things he started working on was to decentralize, to unbundle the power sector in order to allow for this. It didn't successfully work. Jonathan came in, did his best, and we still have issues. Mambila project has been on for how many years now? More than 2 decades. It's going. Monies are spent. It's government to government, they say, but who are those benefiting? Recently, the government wants to probe the $16 billion investment in that region. So those are the factors I'm looking at. And that's why I want to encourage the aspect of national emergency. What it does is this. The national emergency helps to short-circuit the process within the shortest possible time, while at the same time you're working on a long-term plan. We cannot throw away the long-term plan. The national grid is a national security requirement. We cannot throw that away, but we can focus on the small hanging fruits and ensure that these things are well distributed. If you go to the northern region, for instance, fruits and vegetables are destroyed, about 40 to 50% of that destroyed because of absence of proper, management system put in place. There's the need for smaller hydros, smaller dryers, solar dryers. To be given
You're on the same page with Ohiare on this. Yeah.
You know, so if you come to the south, for instance, like I said, I'm in Port Harcourt, and there's no light. And there are a lot of activities that require light to be used. Okay. We have the sea there, wind energy can come in. There's gas deposit here, which can be deployed instead of flaring the gas up there for gas.
Okay.
We also have
let's allow Ohiare also to run his own conclusion.
Okay, in conclusion, just to say that this government is on the right, track. We just need to speed up and scale up everything that we need to do. And as the Rural Electrification Agency, under the leadership of my managing director, Mrs. Damilolo Longubi, has the mandate, to promote this off-grid electrification. We are currently working on at least having about 1,000 mini-grids within the next 5 years. We've gotten funding from the World Bank, about $350 million. We've gotten from the African Development Bank, $200 million. We are energizing our universities.
And for the minister, for the new minister?
For the minister, these are programs that are already there. How can he help to accelerate, its completion, especially the energizing education, university programs from youth, for the young people, about 37 federal universities and 7 teaching hospitals. We've already commissioned
some solar issues.
Yeah, solar.
Separate,
yeah, these are solar based, and how can we quickly complete them so that our
it should be
young people,
priority.
Yes. And then we have the markets, the large markets like Ohiare and Sabongeri and Kano. All of these things we are doing under the Rural Education Agency, and we are there to provide all the necessary support that the minister needs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanusi Ohiare and Kevin Fineface, for weighing in, and for some of you that sent tweets and those of you that listened attentively. It's all about efforts to reposition the power sector and possibly deal with that deep-rooted problem. A lot of people believe some cartel controlling it, making sure that it doesn't get off the ground for them to continue to profit. Is it not time to rid the country of all this? We hope we can do it collectively. My name is Amit Chanakwe. Thank you so much for joining us today. God's willing, we'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good time.